Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are, we're standing on the edge of a precipice, honestly.
We really are.
Yeah. We're looking at a question that is so fundamental and, frankly, so uncomfortable that it kind of threatens to upend how we think about human difference entirely.
It's definitely one of the most intellectually jarring texts we've covered in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it demands a certain stamina from the reader.
Yeah.
And definitely from you listening today.
Absolutely. So let's start here. When we talk about different cultures, the difference between being American or French or English or Italian, we usually think of these as variations on a theme.
Right.
Right.
Like different flavors of the same thing.
Exactly. Like we're all playing the same music, just with different instruments. We assume there is this universal human operating system, and culture is just the interface sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
You eat pasta, I eat burgers, but deep down, we're exactly the same.
And that is the standard liberal view of humanity, yes. The idea that deep down, we all want the exact same things, we fear the same things, and we view the world in roughly the same way.
Right.
I mean, it is the absolute foundation of modern diplomacy, of globalism, even just our day-to-day neighborly interactions. We assume a shared humanity that transcends the superficial stuff.
But what if that's wrong? What if there is a divide so deep, so primal, that it actually splits humanity into two completely distinct biological and spiritual species?
That is the core tension we are navigating today.
Yeah. What if Jew and Gentile aren't just religious labels or national identities, but represent two completely opposing, irreconcilable life forces?
That's the premise. And we're doing a deep dive into a book published in 1924 called You Gentiles by Maurice Samuel.
And let me tell you, Maurice Samuel does not pull any punches here.
No, he doesn't.
I mean, the title alone, You Gentiles, it feels like an accusation, or at least a very direct confrontation. It's not us and them. It's not cultural differences. It's a finger pointing right at the reader.
It is a confrontation. But I think it's important we frame this correctly right out of the gate. This isn't a religious text in the traditional sense.
Right.
Samuel isn't arguing about theology or scripture in the way a priest or a rabbi might debate the interpretation of a specific verse. He is performing what I would call a sociological and psychological autopsy of Western civilization.
Autopsy, wow.
Yeah, and he's writing as an outsider, a Jew who has lived in the absolute heart of the Gentile world, and he's reporting back on what he sees as a fundamental, unbridgeable incompatibility.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to be really clear with you listening right off the bat. We are diving strictly into Samuel's worldview today.
Yes.
This book is over 100 years old. It is controversial. It makes sweeping generalizations about Gentile nature and Jewish nature that, they might make modern listeners squirm a little bit, or a lot.
Yeah, precisely. And that's why we need a very clear disclaimer on the content. Our mission here is to explore Samuel's specific argument. We're going to impartially report on his definitions as he presents them in the text. We're not endorsing them.
Exactly. We're not endorsing them as absolute scientific facts or making moral judgments here. We are strictly analyzing the internal logic of his argument. To understand this book, you just have to accept his premise for a moment.
Right. You have to suspend your disbelief.
You have to accept that these two groups inhabit completely different spiritual universes.
We're stepping into his shoes. We're putting our modern sensibilities on pause to see the world entirely through his eyes, which is a fascinating exercise.
It is. So where does this actually come from? Why does a guy in the 1920s sit down and write a manifesto declaring that Jews and Gentiles are basically aliens to each other? Was he just like a hermit?
Quite the opposite, actually. You have to look at Samuel's life to get it. He was a brilliant observer, a true cosmopolitan.
Right. He was all over the place.
He lived in Manchester, Paris, Berlin, Vienna, New York. He spoke multiple languages fluently. He saw the Gentile world at its absolute height, its massive cities, its prestigious universities, its wars, its art.
And he kept hitting a wall.
He kept hitting a wall. He realized that the dominant narrative of his time, which was this liberal idea that assimilation was the ultimate answer, was, in his view, a complete lie.
The idea that if Jews just tried hard enough, they could blend right in. That if they just drop the traditional clothes and the dietary laws, everything would be perfectly fine.
Exactly. The argument of the day was that if you strip away the strange customs or the kosher laws, a Jew is really just a Frenchman or an American like anyone else.
Just with a different weekend activity.
Right. But Samuel looked at that and said no. He argues that if Jews were just like Gentiles, if they just needed a homeland and a parliament like the Belgians or the Italians, then the last 2,000 years of Jewish suffering were a complete waste of time.
Man, that is a heavy thought. That puts a massive amount of pressure on how you define your identity.
It's his ultimate aha moment. He argues that the suffering, the exile, the sheer persecution, it's only justified if the Jews are fundamentally, inextricably different.
Because otherwise, why go through it?
Exactly. If they are just the same, they should have just assimilated and disappeared centuries ago to save themselves the pain.
He actually explicitly asks about this in the text, right?
She does. He asks, and I'm paraphrasing here, whether these centuries of alternate torture and respite were not a disproportionately high price just for the right to add one more page to the already overburdened records of the nations.
Wow. So he's saying, if we're just another flavor of ice cream, why did we endure 2,000 years of being actively kicked out of the ice cream parlor?
Right.
We should have just changed flavors and been done with it.
Correct. He argues the only logical reason for Jewish persistence is that they possess a distinct life force.
Okay, life force. That sounds a little mystical. What does he actually mean by that? Is it a soul thing? Is it DNA?
He describes it almost biologically, actually. He insists this isn't about what you believe. It's not about dogma or a specific creed. Because you can change a man's creed, but you cannot convert his nature. He writes that to the Jews belongs the Jewish life force, and to the others belongs the Gentile life force. He views it as the biological equipment you were born with.
Biological equipment.
Yeah, it's the lens through which you process reality before you even have a conscious thought about it.
So how does he define them? Like, paint the picture for us. What is the Gentile life force?
He describes the Gentile life force as distinct, highly prone to games, adventurous, and polytheistic. It is this force of joyous expansion. It's about turbulence and drama.
And the Jewish life force.
He describes it as serious, somber, completely obsessed with the absolute, and strictly monotheistic. And he really emphasizes that this is not a choice you make, it's instinct.
It's how you react to a stimulus.
Exactly.
So it's basically hardware versus software.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right, like you can change the software, the religion, the language you speak, the clothes you wear, but the hardware, the actual processor inside, is built differently from the factory.
That is a very apt analogy. And Samuel points out that language actually hides these differences from us. This is one of his most fascinating points early in the book.
How so?
Well, we use the exact same words. A Jew says God, and a Gentile says God. A Jew says justice, and a Gentile says justice.
Right, so we think we're agreeing.
But the internal sensation attached to those words is radically different for both groups.
He uses the color analogy here, right? I found that super helpful when reading through the sources.
Yes, the spectrum analogy. He says, you call a color red, and I call it red, but we can never actually know if we are experiencing the same visual color.
We're just agreeing on the label.
Exactly. He argues that when a Gentile talks about honor or peace, the emotional resonance inside them is completely alien to what a Jew feels when they use those exact same words.
So it creates this illusion of similarity.
Yeah.
And that leads to constant friction.
Right. We think we're agreeing, we think we're on the same page, but we are actually talking completely past each other because our internal dictionaries are fundamentally different.
And that friction is exactly what we're going to spend the rest of this deep dive breaking down, because Samuel takes this theory, this primal dualism, and he applies it to basically everything.
Everything. Sports, war, religion, business.
And honestly, the place where it becomes most obvious, according to him, is in this concept of the game.
Yes. This is the absolute crux of his argument regarding the Gentile spirit. This is the foundation upon which he believes Western civilization is entirely built.
He says that for the Gentile, life itself is viewed through the lens of a game. It is a sport.
Yeah.
And he doesn't mean that in a trivial way, does he? He's not saying Gentiles are just childish or unserious.
Not at all. He means it in a profoundly spiritual way. He argues that in Gentile civilization, he tracks us through ancient Athens, Rome, medieval chivalry, right up to modern America's sport, is the chief spiritual passion.
The chief spiritual passion.
Yes, it is the most consistent, sustained, and intense emotion the Gentile world produces.
He points to universities as proof of this, which I thought was hilarious. And man, this rings so true today. He talks about how alumni and the general public care infinitely more about the university football team than the actual academic curriculum.
Yes, and keep in mind, he wrote this in 1924.
Right, 100 years ago, and it's the exact same dynamic.
He notes that professors might complain about it. They might say the sports are a distraction or a sign of cultural decline. But Samuel says those professors are completely missing the point.
How so?
He says this obsession with the team isn't decadence. It's actually the flower of the Gentile spirit. It is the perfect, purest expression of who they are. The university isn't a place of learning that happens to have a football team.
Let me guess. Spiritually, it's a football club that happens to have a library attached to it.
Exactly. That is exactly his point. Because it's all about the contest.
The adventure.
Precisely. The psychology of the game is about the contest, the adventure, and crucially, playing fair. It's about the struggle itself. Samuel argues that the Gentile world is built on this foundation.
Life is a gallant adventure, a passage at arms.
You see it in how Gentiles structure everything, from politics to romance to career. It's about the chase, the fight, the rules. It's about the drama of the outcome, not necessarily the morality of the outcome.
So what's the Jewish contrast to this? If the Gentile's playing a game, what is the Jew doing?
Samuel argues Jews have absolutely no sporting morality, none. To a Jew, life is a serious, somber duty to God.
A duty.
Yes, there is no play presentation of life. The universe is not a playground. It is a courtroom.
Wait, but, okay, let's be real. Jews play sports. I mean, there are Jewish athletes, there are famous Jewish baseball players, boxers.
And Samuel fully anticipates that objection in the text. He says, yes, Jews participate in sports, but he calls it an artificial success.
Artificial.
He argues that a Jew plays sports to assimilate, or out of a sense of duty to fit into the host culture. They fight or play by forcing themselves to do it, not by a deep biological instinct.
They don't feel it in their bones.
Right. They don't have that innate joy in the physical clash that he attributes to the Gentile. To the Jew, the outcome, the serious, tangible result is the only thing that matters. To the Gentile, the game itself matters.
Samuel says something like he fights by forcing himself to it. He has not your natural gift and inclination for it.
Exactly.
Which leads us to a distinction that I found really, really compelling in the book. The difference between the gentleman and the good man. This really helps clarify the difference between sport and serious duty.
This is where the sociological analysis gets really sharp. Samuel argues that Gentile morality is essentially Queensberry rules.
Like the rules for boxing.
Exactly. It's a structured code of conduct. The central question for the Gentile isn't, is this right or wrong in an absolute divine sense?
The question is it honorable?
Is it honorable? Is it becoming? Is it sportsmanlike?
Whereas for the Jew,
It's simply, is it right or is it wrong? There was no middle ground of honor.
he uses the example of the gentleman thief. You know, like the Robin Hood type or Arsène Lupin. The charming rogue who steals but does it with style and panache.
Samuel says this character is entirely impossible for a Jew to truly understand, because in the Jewish worldview, a thief is a thief.
Right. Stealing is prohibited. Full stop.
It is a sin. But in the Gentile worldview, you can actually admire a thief if he has style, if he shows gallantry, if he follows a personal code of honor. You can forgive the fundamental immorality of the act if the performance of the act is good.
That is a huge cultural difference. It totally explains why we love heist movies, right? Like Ocean's 11. We completely root for the bad guys because they're cool and they have a code.
Right.
Samuel is saying that's a uniquely Gentile trait, valuing the aesthetic of the action over the absolute morality of the action.
Correct. He creates this hard dichotomy between honor and morality. Honor is just a set of regulations for the game. Morality is a direct connection to the absolute.
So the Gentile asks, did I follow the code? The Jew asks, did I obey God? There's that pigeon example, too. This one really stuck with me when I was going through their outline. He talks about the rule in hunting, where it's unsportsmanlike to shoot a pigeon while it's just sitting on the ground.
Oh, yes.
You have to let it fly. You have to give it a chance.
And Samuel mocks this mercilessly in the book. He says, to the Jewish mind, this is completely absurd. If you are there to kill the bird, you are killing the bird.
Right. The morality of how you kill it is entirely irrelevant.
The fact that you let it fly in the air for 2 seconds doesn't make the bird any less dead. But for the Gentile, the method is everything. Giving it a chance validates the sport. It turns a slaughter into a game.
It's the ritual. It's about making it fair, even if the end result is still just death.
It's the ritual of the contest. Samuel argues that Jews simply don't understand this ritual because they are far too serious. They look at the end result, which is death, while the Gentile looks at the process, which is the hunt.
To the Jew, shooting a bird on the ground is just efficient.
Yes. And to the Gentile, shooting it on the ground is murder. Shooting it in the air is sport.
Wow. And this obsession with the hunt and the contest, it leads us to arguably the darkest part of the book. Segment 3, the ultimate sport, war.
This is perhaps Samuel's most provocative thesis overall. He asserts, quite plainly and without apology, that Gentiles love war.
Whoa, okay. I mean, most people listening today would immediately say, no way, we hate war. War is hell. We have entire genres of films and literature dedicated to how awful war is.
And Samuel acknowledges that. He says individually, people will say they hate it, mothers cry when their sons leave, men go reluctantly. But he argues that collectively, historically and spiritually, war is the sublimest of sports for the Gentile world.
The sublimest of sports.
It is the highest, most intense expression of that game instinct. It's the World Series of the human spirit for the Gentile.
He talks about the reaction to the declaration of war, right?
Yes. Think about the start of World War I, which was very fresh in his memory when he wrote this in 1924. What actually happened in the streets?
Flags, merry music, parades.
A sudden rush of blood. He describes it as a joyous release, a glorious accession of strength. He asks his readers directly, do you go to your task of defense or offense? Darkly, grimly, bitterly.
No, you hang out your most gorgeous banners.
Exactly. Your cheeks brighten and your eyes sparkle.
And that's true. Even in modern times, there is this rally around the flag effect. There's this palpable excitement that ripples through society when a conflict begins.
And the reaction to peace, and this is really his smoking gun. He says, look at the armistice. If war were truly viewed as a moral horror, as a definitive wrong in the Jewish sense, then the end of a war should be a time of mass nervous breakdown.
Right. If you just spent 4 years slaughtering millions of people in the mud and you truly realized it was a deep sin, you wouldn't throw a parade.
Exactly. People should be absolutely terrified. They should be repenting for the murders they just committed. There should be a hushed humility across the entire nation.
A national day of mourning.
The day of deep atonement.
But instead,
it's a massive party. It's immediately back to bargaining, boasting, and maintaining national dignity at the peace tables.
because they don't feel guilty.
He says there is no repentance because deep down in their biological equipment, the Gentile conscience doesn't feel it did anything wrong. It played the game.
It fought for the flag.
It followed the rules.
The rules, again, it comes back to the clean kill.
Yes. Samuel notes that for Gentiles, killing is perfectly acceptable if done according to the rules. Open warfare, a formal declaration, a duel at dawn.
To kill otherwise like a sneak attack in the night or without a formal declaration, that's ungentlemanly.
It's not cricket, as the British would say. But notice, the act of killing itself isn't the primary problem. It's the context of the killing that matters.
So what is the Jewish view on war then?
He describes it as strictly defensive and deeply somber. He explicitly quotes that famous Latin phrase, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori.
It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country.
Right. Samuel says this is explicitly not a Jewish sentiment.
Not sweet to die.
Not at all. If a Jew fights, it's a dirty, miserable necessity. It's solely to survive. There is absolutely no glory in it.
But wait, in the Bible, the Jewish God is a God of war, right? The Old Testament is full of battles.
He addresses that. He says, yes, but the people fight vindictively, bitterly, and only to survive extermination. They don't fight for the fun of it. They don't hold tournaments. They don't joust in their free time.
This connects to class too, doesn't it? You mentioned earlier something about the scullion in the outline.
Yes, Samuel observes that historically, in Europe, the right to fight was actually a privilege. It was fiercely restricted to the nobility. The scullion, the kitchen worker, the peasant, wasn't allowed to bear arms or participate in the noble sport of war.
Because it was a high-status activity.
Exactly. Samuel argues that Jews have historically despised the fighter as a human type, whereas Gentiles have spent centuries literally worshiping the warrior hero.
It's so true. Look at our cities. Our statues are mostly generals and admirals. We cast them in bronze and put them on horses right in the middle of our town squares.
And our history books reflect this entirely. Samuel heavily critiques the post-war mindset. He says wars are recorded in Gentile history as glorious adventures. Even the massive disasters are heavily romanticized.
Like the Charge of the Light Brigade.
Or the Alamo.
Right? They are tragedies, but they are glorious tragedies.
But to the Jewish mind, as Samuel portrays it, they are just waste. Futile, bloody, tragic waste.
So if the Gentile life is fundamentally built on sport and war on the game, how does that translate to the biggest question of all? God.
This is where we move into the theological chasm. Samuel argues that if you connect this to the bigger picture, the way a people plays and fights ultimately dictates how they pray.
And he drops an absolute bomb here. He says Gentiles are constitutionally incapable of monotheism.
It's an incredibly bold claim. He argues that the Gentile spirit is naturally polytheistic because it's playful, diverse, adventurous. It fundamentally needs a republic of playful gods.
Well, hold on. Christianity.
Right.
Christianity is monotheistic, and the whole point of it is one God. The West has been Christian for 2 millennia.
And Samuel has an answer for that. He calls Christianity a Jewish export that the Gentile world adopted but simply couldn't handle in its pure absolute form.
So what did they do to it?
He argues they modified it to fit their hardware. He argues the Trinity is essentially a theological loophole.
Yeah.
It takes the absolute crushing unity and breaks it into 3 distinct personas. And then you add the saints.
Oh, wow. So suddenly you have a pantheon again.
Exactly. You have a God for safe travel, a God for lost items, a God for war. Samuel argues this is the Gentile spirit subconsciously converting a very serious Jewish faith back into a comfortable, familiar polytheism.
That is fascinating. So the structure of the religion literally morphed to fit the biological equipment of the believer.
That's his argument. He contrasts the nature of the deity in both cultures. Think about Gentile gods like the Greek or Roman myths. They are highly anthropomorphic. They are human, just bigger and immortal.
They have affairs, they get into fights, they get petty and jealous.
They're primus inter pares first among equals.
And the Jewish God.
Serious, absolute, a crushing unity. There is no play whatsoever in the Jewish God. You don't have myths about God going on fun little adventures down on earth. You have the sheer terror of the infinite.
There is no story in the same way. There is only commandment.
Exactly. And this fundamentally changes how the two groups pray, too.
Drastically, I imagine.
Samuel compares the physical act of prayer. He says Gentile prayer is inherently dignified. It's basically a request from a vassal to a superior lord.
Right.
Even in church, the Gentile maintains his self-possession. He stands tall or he kneels with great dignity. Samuel mentions the Habsburg burial ceremonies as the ultimate example. It's all very regal. It's essentially a formal court proceeding with God.
And Jewish prayer, how does he describe that?
He describes it as complete abasement, a total breakdown of the self. He says he has never heard a Gentile pray with the incoherent abasement of a Jew.
Incoherent abasement.
For the Jew, prayer is about dissolving completely before the One. For the Gentile, it's about maintaining a respectful relationship with a higher power while remaining fully oneself.
It's almost like for the Gentile, God is the referee, or the king who hands out the shiny prizes at the end of the tournament. You want the king to respect you.
Yes.
But for the Jew, God is the only thing that actually exists.
That is a very, very good way to put it. The Gentile maintains his ego even in front of the creator of the universe. The Jew seeks to obliterate the ego.
And Samuel connects us all back to that primal dualism we started with.
He does, because if your life is a game, you need a God who respects the rules of the game. But if your life is a serious duty, you need a God who demands absolute obedience.
Okay, so we have sport, war, religion. Now let's talk about the thing we all do every single day. Business. You'd think money's just money, right? Green is green.
You would think.
But Samuel says, nope. Even here, there's a massive divide.
It all comes right back to the sporting instinct. Samuel observes that the Gentile brings fencing master punctilios into business.
Fencing master punctilios. I love that phrase so much. It sounds so elegant.
It really does. It basically means they treat business like a formalized duel. It has strict rules of etiquette. Samuel actually mocks Gentile business slogans like service or square deal and courtesy.
Right, because they're treating capitalism like a gentleman's club.
He says Gentiles wrap the brutal, cutthroat reality of economics in these nice sporting phrases.
We're all on the same team. The customer is king. Let's do lunch. All that stuff.
Right. It's a heavy veneer of gallantry. But Samuel argues that Jews don't separate business from life in that way. There is no special separate code of business honor. There's just honesty or dishonesty, right or wrong.
So the friction comes because Jews don't play the game of business.
Exactly. Because Jews don't naturally engage in the etiquette, the small talk, the country club rituals, the caracals and curvettings, as Samuel calls them.
And because of that, Gentiles view them as unethical or pushy.
Yes, even if they are technically completely honest.
Wait, so you can be technically honest but socially dishonest in the Gentile view?
Precisely. If you don't follow the unwritten rules of the game, you're a bad sport. Samuel says this is where the daily misunderstanding really festers.
The Gentile thinks he's not playing fair.
And the Jew thinks, I'm just doing business, what is the problem?
This perfectly leads to his incredibly pessimistic conclusion about information. We always hear today, if we just learned more about each other, we'd get along.
Education cures prejudice.
Right. That's the modern mantra. To know me is to love me.
And Samuel says, no, it doesn't.
Man, that is bleak.
He calls it the liberal fallacy. He argues that the idea that the more you know us, the more you will like us is completely false. In fact, he claims that deeper knowledge often deepens the dislike, because it highlights just how alien the two natures are.
So the more I understand that you see the entire world as a serious duty, and the more you understand I see it as a thrilling game, the more we realize we can't really be friends.
The more you realize you are fundamentally incompatible. He notes that anti-Semitism sits with equal grace on the grossest of your peasantry and the most refined of your aristocracy.
So it's not an education issue.
It's not about ignorance. It's not that people are just dumb or haven't read enough books. It's that there is a primal friction between the two life forces. When they touch, sparks naturally fly. Not because of hate, necessarily, but purely because of difference.
Like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It's not the hole's fault. It's not the peg's fault. They just physically don't fit together.
That is Samuel's ultimate thesis. He says we may come to an understanding, never to a reconciliation.
Understanding, never reconciliation. That is a truly powerful line. It's almost like a peaceful divorce decree for humanity.
It is. He's basically saying, stop trying to blend. Stop trying to pretend we are the exact same thing. Acknowledge the huge gulf between us. Respect the distance. That is the only way to avoid the constant grinding irritation.
It's a radical call for, I guess you'd call it separateness.
Yes. Or perhaps just honesty. He thinks the liberal attempt to smooth everything over is a polite lie that ultimately hurts everyone involved. He wants us to look each other right in the eye and say, I respect you, but I am not you, and I never will be.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground here today. We've got the biological and spiritual divide. We've got sport as the actual Gentile religion.
War as the ultimate game.
The difference between honor and right. Polytheism versus monotheism. And the daily friction in business.
It is a totally comprehensive worldview. It explains, at least to Samuel, why the world looks the way it does.
As we start to wrap this up, I want to ask you, what do we do with this today? I mean, this book is 100 years old. Is it just a dusty artifact of the 1920s, or does it actually explain our world right now?
I don't think it's dusty at all, actually. I think it serves as a fascinating time capsule, a very specific, intense perspective on identity. But more importantly, it challenges you to look at culture much deeper than we usually do.
Right, because we tend to think of culture as just food, festivals, maybe some holiday songs.
Superficial stuff, things you can take pictures of for Instagram.
Yeah.
But Samuel challenges us to see culture as the fundamental operating system. How do you view death? How do you view God? How do you view conflict? Is life a playground or is it a courtroom?
It really suggests that universal humanity might be a much harder goal to reach than we think. If he's right, and obviously that's a massive... But if he's right about these deep-seated biological instincts, then modern globalization has a huge hurdle to clear.
Indeed. It suggests that deep differences aren't just errors that need to be corrected by education, but fundamental traits that have to be navigated carefully.
So here is a provocative thought to leave you listening with. Samuel posits that the Gentile worldview makes life a gallant adventure, and the Jewish worldview makes it a serious duty.
Yes.
Look at the world today. Look at our politics, which, let's be honest, feels entirely like a spectator sport right now.
It's Team Red versus Team Blue.
Exactly. Look at our entertainment. Look at our wars, which we literally watch on television screens like video games with cool graphics. Which life force is actually winning right now?
That is the big question.
Are we all becoming Gentiles? Has the game just swallowed everything else? Or are we just getting better at pretending to be players while secretly being the other?
Or perhaps the tension itself is the engine that drives history. Perhaps we need the game to make life bearable and fun, and we need the duty to keep it moral and grounded.
That is definitely something for you to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into you Gentiles. It's been heavy, it's been incredibly deep, and we'll catch you on the next one.